Hello everyone, this was released on Thursday last week. It's now Monday, so I've had a chance to read through it over the weekend. It's the new Rebels and Patriots Blue Book Osprey game written by Daniel Mersey and Michael Leck. It uses the Rampant engine that you've seen from Lion Rampant and Many Would Be Kings, and it's their latest creation. It's pretty good. So what we do, sit down together, I'll move the camera around, and we'll have a flick through the book together.
If this man should fall, who will lift the flag and carry on?
I will.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. As always, so it's paperback. It's got on the back, retails $12.99 in the UK, $20 in America, $27 in Canada. Nice and glossy, so we'll open it up. 62 pages in total. So the contents, you've got the first section is the introduction, then you've got the mustering your company, how to put together your forces, then you've got your rules section, that goes from page 20 to page 37. You've got some scenarios, loads of scenarios, what we've got there right down to L. So we've got a ton of scenarios, and then you've got some example armies. So kind of same layout you'd recognise from other books in the series. It's all covered, loads of pictures, more or less every single page. So a bit of an introduction, nice bit of fluff there to get you in the right mindset. It tells you a little bit about the type of units you're going to be using, infantry, cavalry and artillery, how you might want to base them. And then it goes on about mustering your company. So in this version of the game, you have one officer who's in charge of the whole kind of company, your whole sort of army. He starts off as a second lieutenant, I believe, and then as you play through various games with your forces, he can earn honour and be upgraded and promoted through the ranks and unlock extra abilities which you can use in your forces to make them stronger. So that's kind of really cool. And this next bit tells you about how to sort of set him up, the different types you can be. So yeah, it starts as a second lieutenant or second lieutenant, as you'd say in America, up to captain, major, and then once he's exceeded that rank, he'd go on to be in charge of something bigger than a company. And then there's various tables to roll what kind of a leader he might be. Things from drunkard, ruthless, hesitant, cad, peacock, cautious, battle-scarred, brutal, cunning, familiar face, a ballroom darling, loads of stuff on there. So it's got the usual kind of humour and flavour of the other games, which is really cool. 24 points as always for setting up your forces. It's called a company in this game rather than a retinue or a unit or a regiment or whatever. Usual information about how to base them, what the stat blocks means. It'll be familiar if you've played this before, and if you've not played these sort of games before, it's dead easy. So yeah, how to choose your army, what you need to be doing, the different types. So you got line infantry, light infantry, shock infantry, skirmishers. You've got natives and you've got artillery. Artillery comes in three types: light, medium, heavy. Doesn't specify what type of guns they are. So you can choose whatever gun. I mean, there was I think this is when sort of Gatling guns and things like that started coming in. So you get your gun and you decide, do a bit of research, find out what sort of gun it was, and fit it into a light, medium, or heavy category, I suppose. You've got cavalry, you've got light cavalry and shock cavalry, and then you move on to the battle rules. So what we've got here, so you've got your activations. That's that'd be very familiar to you. I think there's certain things you can do. Some units can do things for free, other units will have to roll a test to see if they activate. If you fail an activation, that unit doesn't activate, but you can move on to another unit within your company and try and get them to do something, so you don't lose your turn like you have done in previous games. And it says when you've lost 75% of your force, your company retreats from the battle and you've lost. So it's the same system as before, rolling 2d6s, but in this time, rather than having individual numbers to beat depending on the unit, numbers, it's a 6 I think, So every activation you need to roll more than 6 to be successful, and obviously that's modified by whether or not your captain is nearby, and terrain and various other bits and pieces. There's special effect if you roll double 1s and double 6s. Double 1s are bad, like in all of these games. Higher you roll, the better. So double 1s are bad, and possibly you can lose the unit and different bits and pieces. Double 6s are really good, so there's some nice little bonuses you might get if you try to activate and you roll a double 6. Usual bits and bobs about terrain. You've got the action attack. Let's have a see what different attacks, different actions there are. There should be a list somewhere. Yeah, so you've got move, you can, different orders you can give. You've got move, attack, fire, skirmish, form close order, volley fire, or rally. So those are different actions you can do. They're kind of similar to the menu would be kings. So you've got your action, your attack action. That's really cool. I had a quick read through this. And basically you can attack anybody within 12 inches. You roll your 2d6, you've got to get 6 or more plus any modifiers that are involved. But the distance you move is whatever you get on the 2. If you succeed, is whatever you get on the 2 dice. So if you're 10 inches away and you want to attack somebody, you give the attack order, you roll your 2d6s, you succeed because you rolled 8, but you can only move 8 inches. So there's an extra bit of a gamble there if you're trying to attack something that's at long range. So your movement is dependent on what you roll on the dice rather than a set number. That's really good. I think that's a bit of flavour. Imagine if you're charging through some woodland to attack somebody. You can just imagine your unit tripping over some loose branches or putting their foot down a rabbit hole or something happening. You might end up stopping short of your target and they're in close order and annihilate you. So yeah, it's quite cool. You've got some special rules, evade and counter attack. They're in there. Resolving attacks is fairly similar, so you take damage a bit like before, so you roll to hit people and then you add the hits together to see if you damage. I think all infantry, I think 2 hits causes a casualty for infantry and 3 hits causes a casualty for cavalry. There are some special rules that kind of tweak that a little bit. Some units have got things that make them 3 hits to kill them and various bits and pieces, but that's the kind of gist of it. So everybody's kind of the same, which is kind of makes it a little bit easier. Some people can follow up attacks, so if they're successful and they cause the other unit to retreat, they can chase after them. And there's a bit on here, storming defences, so if you've got someone dug in, you can charge over and attack them. Some more bits and pieces about how terrain attacks it, how terrain affects it, I should say. You've got the fire action. That's fairly similar, I think. So yeah, you give a order, you roll your 2 dice, get 6 or more of any modifiers, then you start removing casualties. So that's all on there, different bits and pieces. You can face, there's any facing unless you're in close order, and if you're in close order, it's just the people in front of you. How terrain affects fire. Skirmishing action, some units got skirmishing, so they can move a little bit. It's normally a little bit less, I think, so they can do a half move and shoot, or they can shoot and do a half move. Forming close orders gives you more firepower but limits your field of view. That's kind of cool. You can't form square in this. It's not a big enough battle size. These are skirmishes, but you can form close order, which is pushing your ranks together to sort of give off volley fire. So that's kind of cool. And if you wanted to do a bigger game, you could have a few line companies and form a square that way, I guess, if you wanted to. You've got volley fire. That's what you do if you're in close order to improve your firing. So you get +1 to your firing. So normally you would hit, I think it's, for example, you'd hit on a 5+, you now hit on a 4+. So you'd be racking up more casualties that way. You've got your rally action. We'll talk about that in a sec. Morale disorder markers. So in this game, once you start taking casualties, you have to do a test. 6+ again, I believe. If you fail, you become disordered, which means you can still work, you can still be activated and do stuff, but there are some modifiers apply, which makes you less effective. If you get another disorder token against you, become broken, you can't do anything, you're kissing the dirt sort of thing, until you pass a rally test. And so rally is the only order that can be given to a broken unit. And then if you get a third disorder marker, you're routed, so ta-da, you're out of the game. So that's kind of cool, it's a little bit different. And yeah, so that's that. So there's morale tests on there. Then we move on to the scenario section. Scenarios are really cool, there's loads of them, right down to L. So there's a ton in here. There's you can see this nice little diagram, shows you how to set up a game if you've got more than 2 players, which is kind of cool. And it shows you what the central zone is. Some of the scenarios use that. Let me just show you some of the units a bit better, because I think I whizzed through that a bit quicker, didn't I? Right, line infantry. Oh, the screen just conked out. Yeah, so we've got line infantry. So they're kind of like your regular British Empire kind of sort of troops, I guess. Your light infantry, they tend to be skirmishers and things like that. So ranger sections and different pieces. They're kind of cool. You've got your stat blocks, tells you what sort of unit it is, how many units are in it. So it's 12 and 6 again, like some of the previous games, but you can use a special rule to boost up some of your units to 18 models, reduce some of them down to 8. So that's on there as well, and there's different upgrades. You can improve their shooting, improve their discipline, different bits like that. You've got your line infantry, as I said, shock infantry. They're your sort of grenadiers. Imagine your Scots Guard charging mercilessly across, or perhaps you know. So it's a shock infantry. You'd get them on the right flank of a company in a Napoleonic game, I think. I'm not getting into all of this. Skirmishers, yeah. So that's sort of like your ranger units, perhaps. You've got natives. They're all your Indians and various other local people, perhaps some Mexicans. We'll have a look at them in a minute. And then your cavalry. There's not too much about cavalry. You've got light cavalry or shock cavalry. It does say at the beginning, in terms of cavalry, that the size of these games and the training which they fought doesn't really support cavalry too good. So there wasn't a great deal of cavalry. So going back to the scenario, like we said, there's a ton of these. You've got a map in there. So you got first clash at Laminate Ridge. That's a nod to the Pikeman's Laminate, perhaps. Great River Chase, Bridge to Victory, Bullet and Beans. I love the names they use for these things. It makes it cool. Patrol to McClure's Field. Retreat to the Sunken Road. Widow Creek Bridge. Attack on Fort Glory. Long Way from Home, Star Spangled Night. And what's good about all these scenarios, so for example, Long Way from Home, to give you a brief bit of fluff about it. So the Defenders Company has been out on a scouting mission and marching back to their camp along a road. The attacker has spotted them and set up an ambush with his smaller force. And then there's a bit about the setup, some different bullet points, tells you what the attacker and the defender. So the attacker in this scenario would have a 24-point company, and the attacker would only have an 18. 4x4, I should have mentioned that. So this is scale agnostic and miniature agnostic. So you can use any miniatures you like from anywhere, you can use any scale you like anywhere. The book really talks about 28mm, and the table size it recommends is 48 by 48 inches, which is a 4x4 table, which is really cool for demo games, participation games, for doing games at home, for doing games in the club. So you don't need as much. It's not like these massive old Napoleonic tables that are like 18 foot by 10 foot or anything like that. A 4x4 is what it recommends. In this particular scenario, yeah, 4x4. Using the different setup zones, like it said in the diagram it had, and then there's some special rules for the defenders. So defenders units are removed from play when the first model in it touches any table edge in the northeast zone. These units count as escaped. So yeah, so some cool special rules for each scenario, and then it tells you how to end the scenario. After 10 turns, roll a dice, add the turns you've already played, and if you get 16 or more, that's the last turn. And then it tells you the objectives. So there's defender objectives, attack objectives. In this one, the defender objectives, you get 6 honour if more than a certain percentage of your company manage to escape. 4 honour if 50% escape, or 2 honour if 33% escape. And remember that honour was the stuff you used to upgrade your lieutenant for future games. So you want to get as much honour as you can, you upgrade your lieutenant, and then you get some more special abilities that you can use for your companies in the future if you're playing campaigns. If you're playing a one-off game, then you don't need to worry about that too much. You can just use the objectives as a way of determining who won. We've got another scenario, Star Spangled Night. Defend Mendenhall's Battery. Excellent art all the way through, and there's loads of pictures of miniatures and scenery and stuff like that to get you in the mood for painting your own stuff and making your own stuff. And then we come on to the companies. So there's loads of example companies that you can use from the different eras. So you've got the French-Indian War. There's a bit of fluff at the beginning, tells you about the French-Indian War. I understand that some of these conflicts are called, I've got different names depending on which side of the Atlantic you live. Over here in England, these are the names that we're familiar with. So you've got the American War of Independence. I think perhaps in America it's called the American Revolutionary War. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So anyway, French-Indian War, you've got a British Army, you've got a colonial militia, you've got the British Rangers, you've got the Frogs, French Army, and you've got the Native War Party. So there's some examples there. You've got American War of Independence, you've got the British Army, you've got the Loyalist Legion, Hessians, I believe they're Germans, American Militia, Continental Army, French Legion. You've got the Northwest Indian War, and like I say, the fluff in front of it tells you about these conflicts. This isn't a period of history that we covered in school in the southeast of England, where I'm from. So a big part of playing this is learning some cool stuff and doing some research. So you've got Northwest Indian War, American Army, Native War Party, Legion of the United States, British North America. Then you've got the Mexican War of Independence, with the Mexican rebels, the Army of the Free Guarantees, Spanish Army, Spanish Royalists. Then you've got the War of 1812. That's quite a big deal in America. I was reading on Wikipedia, like I said, I don't know much about it. But over here it's more of a blip as part of the Napoleonic thing, I believe. But anyway, yeah, because look at the dates. We'd have been in Europe fighting Boney at this part of history, so it doesn't really fact. Anyway, so you got the War of 1812, British Army, Canadian Militia, American Army, American Militia. You got the Texas Revolution, so you got the Mexican Army, Texas Rebels. You got the Canada Patriots Rebellion, so Canadian Patriots, British Colonials. Then you've got the Mexican-American War, that's got the Mexican Army and the American Army. Cortina War, so you've got the Cortinas. Forgive me, I've no idea who they are, I would have to look that up. American Army and Confederate Cavalry. You've got the American Civil War, that's a big one, isn't it? So you've got the Union Army of 1861. You've got the Confederate Army of 1861, you've got the Union Army of 1862, the Confederate Army of 1862, you've got the Union Army of 1864, the Confederate Army of 1864. You've got Union Brendan's Sharpshooters, and you've got the Confederate Guerrillas. Obviously there was a lot of advance in technology or tactics, I would guess, looking at those dates, so the unit profiles changed to reflect that over the years. That would be my guess. Mexican Adventure, French intervention in Mexico. So you've got the Mexican Republicans, French Foreign Legion, the Mexican Empire. You've got the Fenian Raids, these are the Irish. So you've got Irish Republican Brotherhood and the Canadian Confederation Volunteer Militia. And then there's a What If Intervention Force. So what if the British returned to America after the Napoleonic Wars rather than concentrating in Africa and Asia, perhaps? What would have happened there? So you can play through that if you want. British Army and Canadian Militia you've got down there. So there's loads and loads and loads. If you're not too hot on building armies, there's loads of stuff, and each one tells you what you need. So for example, French Indian War, British Army, you need 3 line infantry, 4 points each of shock infantry. Then you can have grenadiers or Highlanders, and then you can have 1 light infantry. It tells you exactly what you need. Like I was saying, so Cortina War, never heard of it, I'd have to look it up. So the Cortinas, I would need 2 aggressive light cavalry that are poor shooters, They're 4 points each, 3 large units of line infantry that are poor shooters, and 1 light artillery. So it gives me everything I need to jump on the computer and find the appropriate miniatures, do a bit of research, look up the painting guides, and see what it's all about. So it's really cool. And that is pretty much the book. There's a table you can photocopy to keep track of your officer and how he's getting on. And then the other bit you can stick your units on. So that is the book. Like I said, $12.99 from Osprey. It's available in PDF. It's in loads of other places too. If you play Black Powder or Sharp Practice, you've got a ton of miniatures already. It's a no-brainer to get this. This allows you to play similar games on a smaller scale. So you can use all your existing miniatures and existing terrain. I don't think it would take a genius to play battles in the Peninsula or in France as well as part of the Napoleonic stuff. It's all the same sort of time period. But more than anything, it gives you an opportunity to look at some cool battles in history. Perhaps like me, it's an area you don't know much about, so it opens the door to a whole new era to look at, and some great minis. I highly recommended it. Yeah. So anyway, Rebels and Patriots. Take care. Bye bye.